Season 1 of The Making of You with Deante Young is presented by Right.
You got to be careful who you listen to, because even though some people allegedly have good intentions, they can pour crap into you. So I went into a guidance counselor, and the guidance counselor looked me up and down and this, that, and the other. And I will say the guidance counselor was a priest. And the guidance counselor told me, I think your best bet of success is to go to the Army. Nothing wrong with the Army. Nothing wrong with the Army at all. However, it gave me the opinion that he was marginalizing or minimizing what my potential would be. Came home, had a conversation with my mother. My mother said, don't you let these people put that mess in your mind. You do what you want to do. If you want to go to college, that's what you do. And I wind up going to college. Did I struggle a little bit? Yes, I did. But I finished.
I met Ben Holbert about 4 years ago during one of Wayne Dawson's book tour stops that I had organized, and Ben was immediately infectious with his personality.
Where you from? From the village of Woodmere. The village of Woodmere.
Wow.
Man, if
you are every city's son.
Yeah.
No, I'm gonna be honest with you. I knew Ben when he was a kid.
Yeah, exactly.
He is a great storyteller. He's very articulate, and he's very down to earth. And he's also quite accomplished. And, 25 plus years as a news anchor and reporter, a broadcast journalist, multiple time Emmy winner. The man was the mayor of Woodmere twice in a row, and he only stopped because of term limits. He was also one of the first African Americans to have the office, and he is also currently the president of the Holbert Media Group. But all that stuff, the accomplishments, all the flashy stuff, that's great. I love it. But there's something a lot more intrinsically brilliant about Ben Holbert, and it's his formation. Now, what year were you born?
I was born 1959, March 6, 1959, on the southeast side of Cleveland, on 116th near Woodhill Park, which is now Luke Easter Park.
Wow.
Yeah.
So that, when I think about that, the context in which we are born is very, very important to how we get raised. So you were born in civil rights America.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So when I think about that, I'm thinking about, years before the March on Washington.
Oh my gosh.
I'm thinking about the assassinations of JFK and RFK as well as Dr. King. Now, what is your earliest memories of your life?
My earliest recollections, and some for your audience that may be squeamish, I'm going to share a couple of things. But the house that I grew up in, loving home, mom and dad were there, and I had two older sisters. I was born in a hospital called St. Anne's, which is no longer there. It was bulldozed to make way for Kaiser Permanente, which is no longer there. But if you see where the Benjamin Rose Center is, off of Fair Hill and 116th, I think it's Martin Luther King Jr. Drive now, that's the facility, or the facility was there where I was born. Now, why it's important, because at one point that was a hospital for single moms. And but my mom and dad were married in Tennessee, Shelbyville, Tennessee, in 1946. My father had an 8th grade education, and so after having two children, my oldest sister that was born in 1948, and then my other sister was born in 1954, mom and dad decided that their fortunes, if you will, would be up north as opposed in Tennessee in a community called Shelbyville. And so when I got here, arrived on the scene on March 6th of 1959, they had already relocated to Cleveland. My father was parking cars downtown Cleveland, and my mother basically was raising the two girls and now the son. And so when I came on the scene, it was sort of interesting because my earliest recollections was just a loving family. We lived in the upstairs of this 2-story house. The people down on the first floor were Fletcher and Annie Sharp, and they had a son, Robert, but everybody called him Bubba. And I remember coming along at that point, probably I could remember maybe when I was 2, maybe 3 years old, different things. Couple of funny stories. My mom and dad said that I used to disrobe and early on and go outside and just stand in the driveway.
Wow.
And so, yeah, good thing that there weren't Facebook back then. But
Season 1 of The Making of You with Deante Young is presented by Buy Right. Buy Right is proud to be the only Eastside showroom for both new and used office furniture. Additionally, they offer over 35,000 office products for next day delivery. They are locally owned and operated. Please visit buyrightoffice.com.
So I'm standing out there and the circus goes by. And here I am. I don't know no different. So I'm standing there in all of my glory, buck naked, and I follow the circus up the street. So we go from 116th Street all the way up to Kinsman. And finally, my mother realized that I had gone out of the driveway and that I was in buck naked again. I got to say that. So she went and grabbed me and brought me back home. But every time we would have a family get together, that was always brought up that I did that. Then we moved over on Signet. And Signet is off of 130th. And this is where things got interesting. I started to process a little bit more and understand what things were. But the house that we moved into was pretty bad. And so when I would go to bed at night, you would hear this scratching. And I was like, what is that? I have no idea what that is. Well, for your audience, it was rats. We had rats that were going in the walls, and you could hear them. And again, one of my earliest recollections is, my father, great guy, wonderful guy, but, he talked to me one day and he said, come on, we're going to go downstairs in the basement. And I don't know anything. Here I am. I'm 3-4 years old. And my father picks me up in his arm. We go downstairs in the basement. It's dark. It's musty. It's, 1 or 2 lights. I can't even remember. I just remember it was dark. And he had a stick in his hand. So he has me. He's holding me in one arm. And then he takes me across and he takes the stick. And when he lifts up the door, there were a whole bunch of pink newborns.
What?
Rats. In the floor. Newborns.
Wow.
And so, he closed the door, grabbed me, had me in his arms, and we went up the stairs. And then shortly thereafterwards, I think that's when we moved over to Kane Avenue, and that's where I lived until I graduated from college.
That is such a fascinating story. Now,
Yeah.
I personally can also relate to, rats and things like that. My grandmother used to say, she used to call them birds.
Yeah.
Because she didn't want other people to understand, but
Yes.
devastating. So in other words, you're saying you lived an inner city lifestyle.
Yes, sir.
And what is it like in America in the early 1960s in the state of Ohio, living as a young black kid? Special thanks to Walter Radcliffe, another presenter of this episode with Ben Holbert. Walter is the author of the book, The Reboot.
Well, my first recollection of, if you will, white people was my father worked at a parking garage, and there was a gentleman that worked with him by the name of Jack Kreitler. I remember him. He was real nice to me. I didn't have a problem at all. But what I did notice that when it came time to park the cars, my father was the one that would go up, get the keys from people. Typically, it would be well-dressed white men, and he would take the car and park it. Jack would take the money. And then when they came back, they would say, I need my car. My father would go get the car, and Jack would say, greet them and whatnot as they would leave. And as I thought about it later on, I'm wondering, did my father do that? He wasn't allowed to touch the money. That was in probably 1964 when this took place. So, he's coming. My father lived through Jim Crow. He was in the Jim Crow South. So back then, I remember, and I hope I'm not skipping around, but I remember when we used to go to Tennessee every summer. My father even then told me, he said, if we go into C.F. Smith's, which was a grocery store, he said, don't look at them white people. You don't look them in the eye. And I'm like, what is this all about? I had no idea. But as a young kid growing up in 1964 through 68, and we all know that on April 4th, 1968, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. was assassinated. Yeah. And so, but during that time, I can remember various things. I remember when John F. Kennedy got assassinated, my mother and my aunt were crying. Yeah. I didn't know why they were crying. I just knew that my mother and my aunt were hysterical about what took place. And I remember seeing the replays of that. I remember Walter Cronkite saying that the president was dead. So those are early recollections there. And then, as I mentioned, moving on up to 1964, I was going to public school. I had gone to Lafayette at the beginning, which is no longer there. It's been bulldozed. And then I went to Miles Elementary. That's around 122nd or whatever miles. Went to school there. And then I got transferred over to Cranwood. Man, that was dealing with all kind of issues of where children lived and do you go to this school or that school or whatever. But the issue of when I went to Cranwood, when Dr. King got assassinated, we were in Garfield Heights, and it was predominantly white. So now there's constant fighting. And, my mom and my dad, they said, we got to keep our kids safe. So they took me out of Cranwood and put me in St. Timothy's. They took my sister, I think she was going to Jameson at that time, another school that's no longer there. But then they moved her over to another Catholic school called Hoban Dominican. And so from those points, from when I was about, third or fourth grade on up, I went to Catholic school. And it was based off primarily the fact that, mom and dad were worried about the violence that was taking place. I mean, you had the Glenville riots, the Huff riot. You had all this stuff going on. For a kid that's less than 10 years old, hard to understand, hard to grasp. But that's where I come from.
And that's exactly what my point is, because I'm curious about when you see that there is all of this racial strife in the country and in your own city, do you ever feel as a young child that, man, being black is kind of like a problem? I'm not as good as the next person. Did you feel that way?
I felt that way in a couple of situations. I mean, numerous situations. I mean, they're basically throughout my life. When I was a kid, when we moved over to Kane Avenue, we were pretty much one of the only black families over there. This is 1964. And so I remember people that didn't look like you and I that had a hard problem understanding why this black family was moving in. They didn't know anything about my mother and anything about my father, didn't know anything about me and my sisters, but yet and still they formed an opinion. Yeah. And so as I went along, I mean, some other things that I can remember, I was walking down the street on Kane Avenue one day, and I see these two guys in a car, and I was probably about 10 years old. So these guys pull up in a car, and of course, they shout an epithet at me. And
white guys.
White guys.
Okay.
And next thing you know, there's a gun pointed at me.
Wow.
And I just stood there because I didn't know what was going to take place. And they called me out my name, and then they sped off. Well, I hate to say this, but that wasn't the only time, and it probably won't be the last time I get called the N-word. But that was a time where, again, I'm less than 10 years old, trying to process why people have hate toward an individual just because of the color of their skin.
Yeah.
And so, and going to the Catholic school, it was a little bit better, but I still encountered conversations with my white counterparts that were less than cordial. As I will share, I played baseball. I was a pretty good little baseball player, but I was only one of the only black kids playing baseball. And which was weird because you think about Jackie Robinson, Roy Campanella, all these guys that were great, awesome baseball players. However, black kids weren't playing with white kids back in the day. So another fond, vivid memory was we got in the car because we would do like a travel team. And because I was pretty good, I would go get in the car with the white kids and the coach would drive us wherever we're going to play. So I'm sitting in the back seat, a couple of kids are sitting up there, and they start talking about, in this, in that, in this. So the coach turns around. I remember him, Greg Kolakowski. Wow, do I remember names?
Right.
So he turns around, he says, come on, let's hold that down. And they said, oh, we're not talking about Ben. He's one of the good ones. And so,
wow.
So I was a good in one, if you will.
Special thanks to Tracy Chandler, another presenter of this episode with Ben Holbert. Tracy is an activist against domestic violence and human trafficking victims.
But, that situation took place, and I'm sure somewhere in the recesses in my mind, because clearly I can recall it to this day, crystal clear, it stuck with you.
Yeah.
Those things stuck with you. So, living, I don't want to say we were impoverished, but I bet you any amount of money we were impoverished, but my parents never let us know. My father, as mentioned before, had an 8th grade education coming out of the South, and he was doing everything he possibly could to make a better way for his family. And, I found out later on he was a bus driver making $8 an hour, feeding a family of 5, including himself. And how he did it, I have no idea. But he did it.
Yeah, that's interesting because all of us are shaped by our early influences, and our families are the ones that give us values sometimes that we still guides our decisions later. What type of reassurance or affirmation or anything like that did you get from your mom, your dad, your grandparents, whoever raised you? What was that like in your household?
Wow, that's a great question because I recall every summer my father would load us up in the car and we would drive to Tennessee. And there I would see my maternal grandparents, and I had the benefit of seeing my paternal grandmother. She passed away, I believe she passed away in 1967. So I really didn't get a chance to really engage her. However, on my maternal side, my grandmother that we called Mama Nellie, and then my grandfather, Albert Bailey, we called him Granddad. But they were staples of the community that my parents grew up in called Shelbyville. My grandfather owned a company or worked for a company where they delivered ice to families. And he was a stocky guy. We got pictures of him, but he used to take tongs and stick them into a block of ice and lift them up. And back then, and you might hear me say sometimes, refer to it as an ice box. But an ice box was this container where they would take these large blocks of dry ice and put them in there to keep your food cold back in the day. Wow. So, people, they refer to them as refrigerators, but I remember an ice box. My grandfather was a hardworking guy. My grandmother, she did just about everything. She took care of the kids. She cooked, she cleaned, she did everything. And she's sort of a stern woman. She'd love you, she'd hug you, but if you got down wrong, go get me a switch.
Right.
So, I mean, I know there's a lot of people out there who know that feeling, but Mama Nellie, she was like, go get the switch and don't talk back. Don't say anything that would be considered not profanity. Considered profanity. I remember one time, because here I go again, I'm dating myself, but that's part of what the question that you asked. But, we used to have these little slang words, and we would throw stuff out as time evolved, and people would use different phrases. And one was, that's frigid. That's cold, man. That's frigid. Woo! I said frigid one time around my grandmother, and I'm still feeling the spanking because frigid meant a woman that could not have a child.
Wow. And
so she interpreted what I was saying was near being profanity or blasphemy or whatever. But I trying to go back to your original question, Mom and Dad were great. Dad was a provider. Mom was a nurturer. She was there for me all the time. When I did some ridiculous, crazy stuff, she was there for me to make sure that I was protected. So I was the youngest. I don't know my sisters. My oldest sister has passed away, but the middle sister, she would probably say, well, they loved you best. But I don't think so. I just think that, you came along, you were the third child, and the groundwork had already been set for parents trying to raise children. And I got the benefit of the doubt on some silliness. And then also, too, I got chastised when I did something wrong.
Yeah. And what's interesting is that my grandmother, for example, she would always encourage me by saying, one monkey don't stop no show, right? And my grandfather would also say that he would rather be an hour early than a minute late. So my question to you is, what quotes still stick in your head that your parents, grandparents gave you?
Wow, those are great. Well, one monkey don't stop no show. That's one I heard a lot in my household. But my father used to always say, even if you have to make yourself a committee of one, do the job and get it done. And I was like, when you're little, you don't know what that means. But as you evolve and you get older and you go through life, now you begin to see that sometimes you are the only one that's going to step up to the plate to get something done.
Yeah.
And if you have to make yourself that committee of one to get that job done, do it. And so I carried that along. My father also had a phrase which was very interesting. He never met a stranger. And why that was important that I would find out later on, as a bus driver, he treated people with respect all the time. He was one of the nicest guys that you'd ever want to meet. But if you crossed him, you had a little bit of a problem. And there were a couple of times when I crossed him and I found out you don't mess with Dad.
Yeah. Now, were you ever surprised that he was able to be so conciliatory to people, given the fact of all of the racial strife, the Jim Crow South, all of those things can color a person's belief system?
Wow, that's a good one too, because when my father and I happen, have time alone or whatnot, and we talked about different things, he told me about when he was in the South, he was walking down the street, and a bunch of guys that did not look like him threw eggs at him. And so he had eggs all on him, and, there was no way where he's going to stop, knock on somebody's door or complain that this is what happened. So you can imagine how humiliating that was. He, again, growing up in the Jim Crow South, he and I didn't have a chance to talk about a lot of recollections or reflections he had on his part, but my father was in World War II. So here's a guy, and when I go back and I look, he served 3 years. But I wonder, there may have been people at that time that said, I'm going to make it a career. I don't think many black men, maybe I shouldn't say many because I don't want to put a qualification on it, but I've heard stories of people who had very bad experiences. My father-in-law, if I can divert real quick to this story, but one day my father-in-law were having a conversation and I mentioned to him about being patriotic. And I said, I don't understand why people don't stand when there's the Pledge of Allegiance and this, that, and the other. And I saw my father-in-law go from cold to hot in a flash. And he said, flags, a flag, I don't care about fill in the blank, a U.S. flag. He said, I would burn a case of flags right here. And my eyes got big as saucers because I could not comprehend that. But what I found out later on is how bad he was treated in the Army. And he was a great baseball player, a catcher. They wouldn't let him catch. They wouldn't let him play. And at one point, the catcher, the regular catcher got injured, so they had to put him in. And they saw how good he was. And, again, that becomes the story that I have because I had the same situations when I played Little League baseball and even high school baseball.
Wow.
So
yeah, that's interesting. So now I want to talk about April 4th, 1968. Yeah. I'm assuming you were about in third grade.
Yeah.
Okay. Tell me, what type of impact did that make on you at the time, and what did it do with your evolved perspective later?
Great question. I recall when Dr. King, I can recall, the television, the images, him and Ralph Abernathy and Andrew Young and Jesse Jackson on the on the balcony, and you those images are emblazed, and then you also see the images of him in the casket, and so again, I'm a young guy at that point, not fully understanding the total gravity of what Dr. King meant to our country and our world at that point. But it was tough because I saw my mom crying, aunts crying, sisters crying, everybody all upset that this man's life had been taken. Now, I will fast forward ahead. So when I went away to college, I was a part of a contingent of students at Kent State University that went to Washington, D.C. to make Dr. King's birthday a national holiday.
Really?
Yes. So now here I am as a kid hearing and seeing the assassination, and now we move forward to when I'm a college student in 1982, trying to make sure that Dr. King's birthday is commemorated for the great things that he did.
Yeah.
And so
that's significant.
Oh man, yeah.
Now I know throughout your school career, a lot of times we can be bullied. We can, I know I definitely had a great deal of insecurities, limiting beliefs, and things like that. First off, were you ever insecure? Did you have limiting beliefs, and were you ever bullied?
Yes. Yes. Oh my gosh. Now it's funny because, some days you got to stick up for yourself and you got to face the bully. And on a couple of occasions when I was in high school, I had to face the bully. We had a guy, and again, I'll call his name if he's listening. Hi, Jerry Martin. How are you? But Jerry used to bully all the time. But I think what it was more so insecurity on Jerry's part. And what Jerry would do, he would see me as a freshman, and here he was as an upperclassman, and he would decide that he wanted to come up and pick with you, punch you. And on one occasion, he actually picked me up because I was only about 120 pounds when I went into high school. Put me in a garbage can. I will never forget that. If I see Jerry Martin today, I might revisit that. But so that was in high school. But let me go back to another one, which really it makes me laugh some days, and then it makes me go, But I used to deliver newspapers on Kane Avenue and throughout the area. And back then, you're trying to make an honest living, making your money. And then there was kids in the neighborhood who wanted to make sure that they got money from the paper boy. Yeah. So on a couple of occasions, yes, I did. I was if you would, robbed by a couple of kids. There was a guy named Buttons. I don't know what his government name was, but Buttons came up to me one day, much taller and bigger than I was. And he reached in my pocket and he took my money out. And I was like, how am I going to stop this? That money that I had from collecting on paper routes, that was my money. So now I'm delivering papers one day, and I put the paper in the side door, and when I turn around, there goes, and I'll call him Ricky. I won't call him his real name because he's still with us.
Right.
And Ricky said, "Give me your money," and some other choice words. And I say, "Not today, bruh. It ain't happening today." I said, "No, I'm not giving you my money. Give me your money, or I'm going da-da-da-da-da-da." And I just said, I'm not having this. So as he approached me, he got closer, and he was a little bit taller than me, a little thin, but a little bit taller. And something told me, knock him in the next Tuesday. And I swung, and I hit him as hard as I could and knocked him over. So he's on the ground. I jump on top of him. In full disclosure, I'm beating the you-know-what out of him. But I'm at the same time, I'm crying, and I'm saying, "Man, we could be friends, man. We could be friends." And I'm beating him, and then I start thinking, you get that little bubble in your head that says, his brother, who was known in the neighborhood as being ruthless, is going to annihilate me. But I just said, I cannot have people stealing my money, and I cannot have this person stealing my money. But the story don't end there.
When it comes to bullies, I always look at them as secret admirers. They secretly admire you, and that's why they try to take you down, because they need to erase what's great about you. And being demoralizing to you, that's kind of their thing. As long as you have a great relationship with yourself, you can overcome that.
So later on, I think I was in college, got to talking to some buddies of mine, and they told me, "Did you hear about Ricky?" Not his real name. I said, "No, what happened?" "Ricky's in prison for murder." I said, "What?" And when they told me who he allegedly murdered, I haven't got confirmation from it. But when he told me there was a person in government, I'll put it like that this person allegedly murdered. But I, as a reporter, you can go and you can check the reports and information on the correction facilities and who's in there. And many days I would look up and he was still in prison, So a couple of weeks ago, fast forward ahead, and I'm trying to get through as many of these stories as I can. I'm sorry, I'm a little bit verbal here, but I'm at a program. And again, I think I told you earlier on, people used to call me Benji when I was a kid. Couldn't stand it. I want to be referred to as Ben. But I'm standing in the park, and all of a sudden I hear, "Hey, Benji." And I turn around and I look. I said, "Wait a minute." And so when I walk over, lo and behold, it's Ricky. So Ricky has been paroled. Ricky is out. I don't know how long Ricky had been out, but we get to exchanging pleasantries, and he appeared to have Parkinson's disease. I don't know, but he was trembling. He was really struggling. But we exchanged pleasantries, and no mention that he tried to rob me of my paper money. No mention that I popped him in the jaw. No mention of anything else other than, "Man, I'm happy for you. I'm glad to see you," this, that, and the other. So that's 50 years later, 50 some odd years ago.
That's an incredible lesson of just, not laying down and just taking it. And I think it's possible that your father, who never just, suffered fools, I feel that kind of transferred to you.
Yes. And I think in many ways, I think what my father was trying to share with me is to teach me to have a little bit of resilience, but also restraint.
Yeah.
Because, I tell my wife this all the time when she's driving. I said, you can be right and be dead wrong. Meaning everything that you do could conform or be appropriate. But if you're at the wrong place at the wrong time, you could wind up losing your life.
Yep.
And I think like with my father, what if my father, when those guys threw the eggs on him, if he would have turned around and cussed them out and this, that, and the other, well, in that day, he might have been swinging from a tree.
Yeah.
And I hope that, the illustration of that, I hope it's not too much for for your listeners or your viewers, but the honesty of it is that was reality in the South.
Exactly.
That was reality.
One thing I liked in my sit down with Ben was just realizing that success is built one brick at a time. And I'm talking about bricks being thrown at you. He was so great under fire. And even though he got frustrated in all those different moments, I can honestly say that those things shaped him in a positive way more than it tore him apart. Now, by the time you got to high school, you went to Benedictine?
Yes, sir.
Okay, by the time you got to high school, it's a little bit different world, but it's still racist. We're talking, but the end of Jimmy Carter, beginning of Ronald Reagan. Now, tell me what high school was like for you.
High school was interesting because when I went there, I'd come from St. Tim's, and it was a lot of us that went to Benedictine out of St. Tim's. So I'm there with my boys, Ron Manning, Billy Clayton, several other guys that we grew up in the neighborhood, so we knew each other. But then when we go over to Benedictine, you go from a classroom of 18 to 20 students, now you in a school of 400 or 500, which still doesn't sound like a lot, but you with a whole bunch of different other people. And a lot of the guys that came over there, I remember, like I said, I was a little guy. I was about 5'3", 120 pounds coming into high school. We had a gentleman who went on to play for Ohio State and went on to play for the New York Jets by the name of Alvin Washington. Alvin came into high school 6'3", 215 pounds.
Wow.
And my freshman class, I'm looking around at these dudes, and I'm like, wow, these dudes are giants. But to go back to the social issues, black kids hung with black kids, white kids hung with white kids. And you could see the difference. You go into the lunchroom, white kids on one side, black kids on the other side. And the only time that you really came together then was through sports. So they would play, guys that played football, they were together with these guys that played baseball. It was myself and a gentleman, we played through high school. His name is Norman Roscoe. Mm-hmm. And me and Norman were the only black kids on the team. Yeah. And I give you a story because I told somebody about this the other day, but we used to practice up at Wood Hill Park. We would have to walk up from Benedictine to go up to Wood Hill. Well, when the kids got out of Audubon, when the bell rang and they would see these guys from Benedictine walking up to go practice baseball because the coach made us walk up there, they would go and attack the white kids. Mm. And then they would stand by me and Norman Roscoe, hold us back and be like, we ain't got no beef with y'all. We got a beef with them. And they would beat the you-know-what out of our baseball players. And it was tough because after we got done, Norman and I had to go play with them. And that was difficult. But then on the same stretch, when we would go on the west side or we would go to predominantly white schools, Norman and I would be called out of our names. The N-word was like, hey, the cheering section. And nobody stopped them. Nobody said anything.
Did you ever feel like that you were anti-white, or did you find white girls attractive or Hispanic girls attractive?
No. In grade school, high school, thought they were different. Yeah. But I don't believe I would have been met with a lot of favor if I would have said, hey, Mom, here's Melissa. She's my girlfriend. I don't know if Mom would have gone for that, But I'm not saying that, that would have been more so because of how they were brought up, not necessarily with me.
Yeah.
But no, I never dated out of my race. No, I can't. I really can't say that I found anyone attractive, or I don't want to say attractive. They might have been attractive, but I didn't want to act upon anything like that.
That's interesting. Now, in high school, did you have any idea what type of career path that you wanted to have?
Wow, man, you asking some great questions. I was bashful. I was shy. I hung out with my boys, and that was the only place, the guys, Daryl Larry and Arthur Worthy and all the rest of these guys, I would hang out with them, and that's when, if you will, I would sort of blossom. And when I was playing baseball, I would blossom. But for the most part, I was sort of a quiet guy. And I recall being interested in media, but I never thought that I could do it. And, imposter syndrome or whatever else like that sort of evolves. But at the end of the day, no, I just never thought I could do it. But where it changed, if you will, or sort of changed, there's two elements of that story. But my cousin, Jimmy Johnson, he went to Kent. And when he went to Kent, he studied communications. So I was like, okay, he studied communications, I'll study communications. So that's how that happened. But another interesting story with that evolution, at one point I had to leave Kent because I wasn't really doing very well as a student. And they gave me an option. Either you get better grades or you can go home for 2 years and think about it and then come back. So what I did, I made it my own decision where I dropped out of Kent and came to work. But during that time, I went to go to a place called the Ohio School of Broadcast Technique. So when I'm down there, I'm studying engineering. I'm working on getting my first class FCC license, which allows a person, an engineer, to be able to work at the television station. But this white guy comes up to me. He's a teacher, and he looks at me and he says, "How come you're not taking announcing classes?" And I said, "Well, I'm sort of bashful and shy, really." He said, No. He said, "For a black guy, you're not a bad-looking guy, and you're well-spoken. You need to consider being on air." And I'll tell you, when he said that, I was livid. I said, "What are you talking about? I'm a halfway decent-looking guy, but better still, I'm articulate. Well, shoot, come into Molly Irene Holbert's house and split verbs, as my mother would say, or do not have a command of the King's English, you're going to have problems." So, but when he said that, I took it, at one point, I took it as offensive, but then I took it as a compliment. Because, quite honestly, that changed my whole trajectory of my broadcast career. When I decided that I was going to take announcing classes and or improve upon my skill, that opened the doors for me to go to work at WJMO as a reporter, to Channel 43 as a reporter, to be able to go to Channel 3 and 19 as a reporter and do all kinds of other stuff. Yeah. So had I taken offense to what Roger Carter told me that day, I may not be sitting with you right now.
Well, you know what I think of? I'm always thinking about things that are outside the frame, right? So I'm thinking, okay, so you graduated Kent State 1984. 1984, we are uniquely qualified as black people with a whole new set of opportunities. Michael Jackson's the biggest star in the world. Eddie Murphy is dominating with Beverly Hills Cop Trading Places. We have Jesse Jackson running for president. And you are like smack dab in the middle of all of that.
Yes,
so
sir.
Everything, I think context matters. So when I think of that and I think about your part in it, and also maybe something you hadn't considered, Walter Cronkite many years later could have planted the seed that you didn't realize.
Yes.
With the announcement of Kennedy's assassination.
Exactly.
And I think about all of that thing. I think about how John McCain opposed the Dr. King holiday and how Stevie Wonder's Happy Birthday is about Martin Luther King. This convergence of events and circumstances, I think, was kind of like the cradle that you were in at the time.
Yeah. And that is a great analogy, but when you're living in it,
You don't see it.
you don't see it. When I sit back some days and I reflect upon what I did, what I was involved with, I have to pinch myself sometimes. when I tell my kids about me going to D.C. trying to make Dr. King's birthday a national holiday, they say, "You did what?" And I don't think it was a big deal, but it was me and about 25 other students from Kent who got on buses and went to D.C. And when we got there were students from all across the country there. And we saw Representative John Conyers. We saw Stevie Wonder. We were in the Capitol. We were there. And I think I wrote an editorial that appeared on Channel 3. Back then, I'm a college student, and I'm on Channel 3. The segment was called Three the People, not We the People, but Three the People. And it was basically a 30, 60-second opinion piece that I wrote, and I voiced it on television. But we were young, maybe dumb, not necessarily stupid, but we were active college students trying to make a difference.
It's interesting because you went to Kent State, and Kent State is well known for producing great figures. I mean, Arsenio Hall was already on his way by the time it got to be 1984.
Yes.
Steve Harvey was anonymous, but he was climbing the ladder in silence.
Yes.
And The Cosby Show debuted in 1984, and Bill Cosby changed the face of television.
Sure did.
So we think about all that. Purple Rain came out that summer. Prince did a lot of incredible things. So when you look back now, it's always better. You can connect the dots going backwards, but not forwards.
Yeah.
And I think about this, I feel like it's awesome. Wayne Dawson even was dominating on television at that time. So I'm not sure if he was a figure to you that you looked up to. But talk about that.
You are wonderful bringing up Wayne, because Wayne and I were we were at Kent sort of crossing over. And then when I got my first job in television, which was at WJKW, also known as Channel 8, I came in as a vacation relief engineer, and there was a gentleman by the name of Wayne Dawson and a lady by the name of April Sutton who were part of this program that Virgil Dominic put together to help these young black journalists to grow. So I worked briefly with Wayne. He was working in the newsroom. I'm working as an engineer, but I would see Wayne every now and then. And then as time evolved, Wayne became a reporter on Fox 8 doing great things with Herb Thomas and others. And my transition went over to Channel 43 and others. But Wayne Dawson, Cleveland doesn't know what they have in Wayne Dawson. They appreciate him, they love him, but that gentleman is a gem. He is a wonderful minister, a wonderful preacher, a great friend, and I just I'm praying for him, as you and I both know. He's gone over the hump, but you know, as he mentioned to a group of gentlemen, I was at a program the other day. He said every 3 months he still has to get checked to make sure that the problem that he had, that he overcame, that he survived, that it does not reemerge.
Yeah, I think that's powerful. Over the course of all of those years you were in television, what would you say is the thing that you learned the most about the industry and about yourself? Well, there was racism. I mean, there were a couple of times that I had to bite my tongue and restrain myself. One time I wasn't so successful and I almost got fired. And I'll jump to that and then I'll come back to, your question specifically. But I was working down in Akron, and me and this gentleman who did not look like us, we had a little difference of opinion every now and then, but we had to work together. And one day he comes into the newsroom. I'm writing my story on the computer. He comes into the newsroom, and the tripods back then probably were about 40 or 50 pounds. They were a big piece of metal. That's where the camera would fit on top of it. He walks into the newsroom, takes his tripod and throws it right at me. And so when that happens, I immediately jump up, another bully, if you will, but I immediately jump up. But when I went to go approach him, one of the producers says, "Oh, no, we're not going to have that. No violence in here."
I said, did you see what this dude did to me? I didn't see anything, but I see what you're about to do. Don't make me have to call Cleveland, and meaning calling Cleveland was calling Channel 3, the parent company, to report me. And I said, you know what? I'm too old for this. I'm too old for this. So that pretty much, after that episode, that was in the early 2000s, I left television as a reporter in August of 2005. And it was based off of those incidents, and it was just based off of the fact that doing news in that period of time, it wasn't fun anymore, because the only time it seemed like they would call Ben to do a story if it was something dealing with crime, despair, destruction, criminality in the inner city. And I would go and say, look, we got some great people in our community. When I worked at one television station, it wasn't Channel 3, but I worked at one television station. I asked to do a series of stories called The Good News Street Beat. And the purpose behind that was to be able to go out and to put a microphone in the face of somebody who was doing great things in the neighborhood. The people at the Boys and Girls Club that were coming out of their own pockets to make sure the kids on the 131st area were able to go somewhere and recreate and have fun. You know, people in the community that were making sure that our young folks were coming up right.
Yeah.
But I did it for 13 weeks because they only let me do it for 13 weeks. But it was disappointing.
Yeah.
And I did. There are many days that I believe that had I been born with the last name ending in a vowel, or maybe ending in another way other than being Ben Holbert, that I may have gone farther up the ladder.
Yeah.
You know, I think I had skill set, ability, and talent. I did a lot of different things, but, you know, that glass ceiling was there, and it was not going to allow me at that point to ascend any higher than, quote unquote, a general assignment reporter, and occasionally I did fill in news anchoring. So, you know, I don't know. I had great times as a reporter. I was able to do some great stories. I thought, you know, I was able to win Emmy Awards, not so much based off of just an Emmy Award, but it was 2 Emmy Awards for a program called Silence the Violence. What we were trying to do is turn the camera and the spotlight on people who were trying to make sure that violence was eradicated in our community. I did a PSA, Ben Holbert raps about gangs. And I will remember the script to this day. It's 10 seconds long. Make your mama cry. Lose your best friend. Die an early death. Do you really want to be in a gang? Think about it. Peace out. 10 seconds. 10-second statement that won an Emmy Award. And the bottom line was I was trying to use the tool of television to make a difference in the lives of people.
Yeah.
But you can only go so far.
Well, it's interesting when you talk about the discrimination piece, when you were called out for violence in the studio, and the other person didn't. So it reminds me of Chris Rock when he said, "I live in this great neighborhood. I'm doing pretty well for myself.
Yes.
I got it, but I had to be like one of the greatest comedians of all time." He said, "My next door neighbor is a dentist, and he's a white guy, so that's pretty funny." But so that's interesting. Now, oh my goodness. One of the things I tell people is that you might be done with your past, but your past has more work to do in other people. So anything that Ben endured and experienced in his life, he can pass that on to the next generation. And trust and believe, there was a couple of drop your jaw moments for me listening to some of these tales of trouble that he went through. Now, your dad died in 1984, right?
84, September 30th. Yes, sir.
Okay. So that's really interesting to
me.
What did that do to you in terms of what you could not say any longer to him that you were dealing with after the fact?
Blessing and a curse. The blessing was I graduated from Kent State August 16th, 1984, and he was sitting in the audience, so he saw me. But 2 months later, he's gone. And there were times that it was difficult because I was working in television at that time, so he did get a chance to see me as the engineer, and he also got a chance to take me to work at Channel 25, or he got a chance to, but he took me to work at Channel 25. So he saw his son doing things there. But, there were many times where if I could, when you see sometimes they say, if there's one person that you could talk to one more time, it would be my father. Because my father, he was a silent force in my life. He told me about a lot of different things. He showed me a lot more than he told me because he did it through his work. Like I said, here's a guy that would get up at 4 o'clock in the morning, work one part of his shift, be home when his son, who was in the 3rd and 4th and 2nd grade, came home for lunch back then, and he would be there. And then after, he would make sure I got something to eat and went back to school. Then he would go back to work and work from 2 o'clock till 6 o'clock 6 or 7 o'clock in the evening.
Wow.
And you got to imagine, if somebody's got to be at work or get up at 4 o'clock in the morning, and by the time your head hits the pillow in the evening, it's 10 o'clock or 11 o'clock at night, woo, you're burning the candle at both ends.
Yeah.
He did it for 16 years.
He put so much into you that all of us are the recipients of that. I call that a public inheritance.
Great
when,
point.
when they put that in you. I am interested in knowing who were your inspirations over the course of your life. Like, for example, for me, I see Michael Jackson as a young kid, and I'm like, okay, I can be different and creative. So he gave me that inspiration. Who inspired you? What person, what book, what anything inspired you to be something more?
Well, my mom used to always tell me about Jackie Robinson. I didn't know a lot about Jackie Robinson, but I knew he played baseball, and I wanted to play. If I could have got my biggest wish, it would have been to play second base for back then the Cleveland Indians. But that never happened. But Jackie Robinson was an inspiration. Clearly, my father, definitely head and shoulders, was an inspiration to me. Outside of the household, I could recite Martin Luther King's I Have a Dream speech when I was a young kid. There were a couple of other people that I would, believe it or not, they were either contemporaries or just a little bit older than me, but they gave me that drive and that inspiration. You had mentioned a little bit, I think you mentioned earlier, but I'm in the process of trying to write some memoirs, reflections of what took place over my years. And the person that gave me the biggest motivation was my barber, Gwen Todd. Gwen would come up to me. I would go get my hair cut, and Gwen would come up to me, and she would ask me about broadcasting. And when I would tell her my stories of what could be considered defeat, she would pour back into me. Ben, don't you listen to these people?
Yeah.
You keep doing what you got to do. And so she would be on that Mount Rushmore. A couple other people, and if I could, I just want to go back to something, a question that you asked me about high school that I didn't insert that I think is important. You got to be careful who you listen to, because even though some people allegedly have good intentions, they can pour crap into you. And I have to be careful with this one, but I will go there because it is so important. But when I was in high school, I was in my junior year, and it was time to start looking at what's the next steps going to be. So I went into a guidance counselor. And the guidance counselor looked me up and down and this, that, and the other. And I will say the guidance counselor was a priest. And the guidance counselor told me, I think your best bet of success is to go to the Army. Nothing wrong with the Army. Nothing wrong with the Army at all. However, it gave me the opinion that he was marginalizing or minimizing what my potential would be. Came home, had a conversation with my mother. My mother said, don't you let these people put that mess in your mind. You do what you want to do. If you want to go to college, that's what you do. And I wind up going to college. Did I struggle a little bit? Yes, I did. But I finished. I have a degree on my wall from 1984, and my father got a chance to see me graduate, and so did my mother. They got a chance to see me graduate there, and my mother almost got a chance to see me get a master's degree.
Wow.
So
Yeah, that's powerful. All of that is powerful.
Yeah.
Powerful.
So-
Who would you say has been, as far as people that's not related to you, who are the strangers that came into your life that changed your direction? It could be a spouse, it could be a mentor, a boss, a friend.
I got a long list, but
Top four.
Top four. Okay, good deal. That helps me. Benny Isabel, Reverend Benjamin Isabel, he has passed away. But Benny was a kid that came over to our neighborhood. He was a little bit older than me, but he was the kind of guy that would sit back and say, "No, come on, we going to play sports. Metal sharpens metal. Iron sharpens iron." And Benny was the one that was trying to work with you to make sure that you became a better athlete. So he would be on my Mount Rushmore. Another kid, he was younger than me. His name was James Bodie. James Bodie also has gone on to his reward. But the reason why James was so important, we delivered newspapers, and at one point, kids in the neighborhood didn't want to deliver newspapers, so it was just me and Bodie, James Bodie. And the gentleman that was the district manager that came around to give us our papers to deliver, he came to us one day and he said, "Hey, look, I don't have anybody delivering papers on the Harvard area, Lee Harvard area, this, that, and the other. Why don't you guys get on the truck with me? We'll throw papers and I'll pay you." So it's like, cool, no problem. Well, one day, Bodie went to the district manager and he said, "We ain't working today." And he said, "Why not?" And he said, "You ain't paying us enough." And I'm looking at Bodie. I'm like, "Man, are you kidding me? Now I'm trying to get money to do this, that, and the other, and so forth and such." But the lesson was, Bodie said, "No, we not doing it." And for whatever reason, I followed Bodie. And a couple of days later, Bill Martin came back and he said, "Okay, how much money do you guys need?" So we wound up getting, I think it was an extra $10 working with Bill Martin. But the moral of that story was that, you need to know your worth. You got to know your value. And some days you got to sit back and say no. And later on in life, one day when I was working at Channel 43, I was supposed to get a signing bonus. No, actually it's Channel 19. I was supposed to get a signing bonus. And the news director, he's like, well, we'll get it to you later on. I said, "Really? I'll be back when you get it to me later on." And I got up and I left and I went over. The gentleman's name is Avery Friedman. He's my attorney at that time. And when I went to Avery's office spitting fire, I said, "They were supposed to give me my signing bonus and they didn't." And Avery's got this big grin on his face. And he said, "Go back over to the station. They called. They knew you were coming over here. Your check is waiting on you." So I went back over to Channel 43, Channel 19 and 43, that's just poked out mad, this, that, and the other. And the news director, Greg Caputo, I don't know if he's listening, but it happened, so it ain't a lie. He hands me my check with my signing bonus. But had I not stuck up for myself, I wouldn't have got it.
Yeah, that's powerful. That's two of your Mount Rushmore.
That's two. Deborah Johnson, I would put her up there. Here's the reason why. I was working at a company in Beechwood, and when I worked there, it was a bunch of women who were not making as much money as me. And so I organized a labor union, or tried to organize a labor union. We missed by one vote. But Deborah worked there, and Deborah came to me one day in a real sisterly tone and told me that I needed to take my you-know-what back to Kent State and get my degree. And she said, "You don't need to be here. You got more to offer than working on an assembly line." And I was like, wow. But again, Deborah really hit it home. I went back to Kent State, wound up making the dean's list, wind up pledging a fraternity, which is very informative, or not informative, but very important in my life to this day. But Deborah's guidance and to say, take your rusty dusty back to Kent State and buckle down and get a degree, she would be on that Mount Rushmore. And I, you know, I could go over my mind over and over and over again, but Gwen Todd, you know, going to get your hair cut, you know, when you sit down in the barber chair, everybody's sitting around, but to have your barber come around and get right in your face and say, hey, look, you need to do this, you need to do that. And it's like, well, ain't nobody, you know, she would get on me all the time. You need to write a book. And I said, Gwen, ain't nobody gonna read my book. What do they want to read my book for? You got stories, you got this. And that's the reason why when I, quote unquote, retired, now I have a little bit of time on my hands. That's what I'm doing. I'm writing memoirs, telling these stories about the people, places, and things. Jesse Jackson, Oprah. I met Oprah Winfrey and talked with her for an hour.
Wow.
Before she was a billionaire.
Wow. Yeah. You know what? Just so you know, with the work that I do, I'm always telling people we are the least qualified to know what other people need from our story. So, you know. Oh, my gosh. Just think about that.
And if I could insert this, and again, I'm running off at the jibs, and I apologize, but I used to, when I was a reporter, whenever they would come down to the newsroom and say, well, we have a career day, does anybody want to go? Nobody would put their hand up. So I would put my hand up. I said, I'll go. So I went to a career day at Audubon again. And for those of your people in your audience, they probably know Audubon had its challenges here and there. But I went and I started speaking to these students. And no exaggeration, just truth and honesty. Little couple, boy and girl in the front, they kissing and hugging. I'm trying to give this speech. I look in the back of the room, there's a plume of smoke, and it wasn't cigarettes. And I'm like, wow. And then guys over there look like they rolling dice. But I was told, if you start, don't stop. Just keep going. So I gave my speech. And when I left out, I felt horrible. I said I didn't reach anybody. But then about a year later, I went over to South High School for a career day. And this young lady comes up to me. She said, do you remember me? I said, no, I don't remember you. She said, I was at Audubon that day when you came and talked to the students. And because of what you said, I've decided that I want to pursue a career in communications. Bruh, check please.
And this is the reason why I feel that we need to preserve the stories of our ancestors as well as ourselves, because if we don't understand things that people endured, there's a very easy way for us to just think life is simpler than we think it is. See what I mean?
And you never know who's watching and what you're pouring into somebody.
Your whole life is a public inheritance. All of us is. You know, I do know that in 2012 you became elected to the village council of the village of Woodmere.
Yeah.
And then in 2018 you became the official mayor.
Wow.
Now my whole thing is, why politics? And did you feel any trepidation because you had a lifetime of racial ambiguity and sometimes just flat out disrespect? Why politics?
I did not go seeking that. And, my phrase is, if you want to hear God laugh, tell him what you plan on doing. So how it all started in 2012 or 11 was I'm out in my yard transitioning between different jobs, and I'm out in my yard and this little lady that lives down the street comes up to me, starts wagging her finger in my face. You need to go up there and see what they're doing up in Woodmere Village. No. She just going off. And I said, hey, Bonnie, hold tight. I'm just trying to water my petunias, huh? Leave me alone. She said, no, you need to go up there. So I go up to the council meeting, and it was bad. You had one elected, I'll put it like this. One elected official is arguing with another. And at one point, the one elected official told the other one, well, I got an idea. Let's go outside and settle this. And I'm sitting there, because here I am. I had covered Cleveland City Council. I covered the Akron School Board. I had covered the Cleveland School Board. I covered all these people elected And then I sit up there and see this in my own community. So I'm sitting up there and I'm like, I see what Bonnie was talking about. So at the end, during public comment, I got up and I said, you know what, folks, this is embarrassing. You didn't pass any legislation. You argued with each other, and you look like you don't know what you're doing. So I go home, do some thinking, talk to the wife. I said, maybe I should run. I ran and I got elected. So now I'm on the council, and I, try to fill in as many blanks as I can in a short period of time. The first 6 months, I was ready to quit because I said, this is bad. We're fighting constantly, this, that, and the other. Residents are coming up, they're fighting, they're angry. I said, this is not what I signed up for. So at that particular point, I was about to throw in the towel, but then I always learn, don't quit. There's a poem called Don't Quit. Things go wrong when they sometimes will. Da-da-da-da-da-da. Some other folks can fill in the blanks for it. But I didn't quit. And so the next year, I'm on council. You get 4 years, and then you get reelected, if you're lucky. And so the first year, I'm a council member. The next year, I go to the lady that was the council president, and I say, hey, look, I'll support you for another bid. I just want to let you know. She said, we supporting you. I was like, what? She said, yeah, we want you to be the council president. I said, you got to be kidding me. Well, long story short, for 5 years, I was the council president for Woodmere Village. And what I tried to do, which is important, was support the mayor. I think that people sort of lose sight is politics is a blood sport, but at the same time, you're trying to do something to advance the community and help people. So you can't do that with a lot of acrimony and punching and fighting. And you see what's going on in Capitol Hill right now, and you see what goes on in Washington, especially during the Obama administration and even the Biden administration, where there was so much vitriol against the person that's sitting in the Oval Office. So I tried to support the mayor. So when there's term limits in Woodmere. So at the end of his term, he comes to me and he said, man, you need to run. I said, run for what? For mayor. I said, what? No, I had no desire. And I went to the church that's that's not too far from Woodmere. And there was another gentleman, Emmanuel Curry. He's passed on, but every time I see him in church, Holbert, you need to run for mayor. I said, Mr. Curry, I ain't running for mayor. No, I don't want to be mayor. You need to run. We need that. No, Mr. Curry, ain't gonna happen. That was my plan. That wasn't God's plan. Mm. And next thing I know, I wind up becoming mayor of Woodmere Village. Served 2 4-year terms. 8 years, and the only thing that, if you will, stopped me was term limits. So there is a lot to unpack about being an elected official. It is a tough job. It's a thankless job sometimes. I don't mind telling you, it's the truth and the honesty. As mayor, there were days I would get in my car and I would drive to Geauga County, sometimes Ashtabula County, and park by the side of the road and shake my head, and tears would drop out of my eyes. And it was because I felt I wasn't able to accomplish the things that I wanted to do for the people of Woodmere. And there's a lot to that. But then I would get in the car, straighten myself up, point that car back to Cuyahoga County, and do it all over again. And there will be days that 3 o'clock in the morning, I can't sleep. And I look up at the ceiling and I pull out my phone and I would start writing stuff, trying to think of how I would be better prepared for the next day. And it was tough. And then when I would go to my doctor looked at me, man, what's wrong with your blood pressure? Because my blood pressure, my doctor, me and him are good friends. But he said, man, what's going on with your blood pressure? Blood pressure skyrocketed.
I always assumed that Woodmere was just a really upper crust white bread town. Is that true, or did you ever experience a rash of racism?
Well, and one thing that I just want to make sure, because I want to give give honor to the first black mayor of Woodmere, and his name Samuel Perry, and he was in 1965. He predated Carl Stokes, and there have been a number of black mayors since me. I was the 15th mayor of Woodmere. So, once Samuel became the mayor of Woodmere, there was been only one white mayor afterwards.
Wow.
So everybody else has been black, and I've been blessed to be one of those. But Woodmere is about 60%, 65% black. It is probably one of the best kept secrets, not only in the state of Ohio, but across the country. I mean, the assets that are there, the stores, has all these upscale properties, and it is a beautiful community. But there too, you can have racism that reveals itself, but then also you can have the crab in the barrel syndrome. And some days that can be just as frustrating as somebody who just wants to call you the N-word right to your face.
Yeah.
But if you cannot, you're entrusted. People they voted for an individual to represent their best interests. And that's what I lean into when I would go to work every day. I mean, I go to work at 7 o'clock in the morning. Some days stay there to midnight. Wife calling me, when you coming home? Honey, I got to get some stuff done. Well, you shouldn't do this. You shouldn't do that. I said, guess what? I raised my hand and I took an oath that I was going to do the best I could for the village.
Yeah.
And quite honestly, when I walked out of office on December 31st, 2025 at 11:59, I felt like the good Lord said, well done, my good and faithful servant. I hope and pray.
That's extraordinarily powerful. It sounds like Bonnie should be on your Mount Rushmore.
You know what? She should. I mean, honestly.
She did change your direction.
She did. Oh my gosh. When I sit back, I mean, if I ever get alone in my thoughts, because everybody's got my phone number, but there are probably some names that I neglected to say that really inspired me. I had a couple of teachers that poured stuff into me, and I hope that I didn't disparage the priest, but that happened.
Yeah.
And maybe by him telling me, well, I think that you should go to the Army, that might have been just akin to saying that I don't think you can do it.
Yeah.
And so now I got to say, you're not going to tell me what I can do. I mean, so many stories. If I could throw this one in real quick, and I know we're short on time, but this is about perseverance. So when I was early on, when I was trying to get jobs in television, I would write resumes, do the audition reels and everything like that, send them out left and right. So I sent one to a television station in Texas. Can't recall the name of the news director, it's not important. But that joker sent me back a letter, and in his letter, it was 3 paragraphs. First paragraph says, I got good news and I got bad news. Good news is I got a job open for a reporter. Bad news is I'm not considering you for that job. I said, wow, go to the second paragraph. I got more good news and more bad news. The good news is I got a job open for a weekend news anchor. Bad news is I'm not considering you for that either. And then at the end, he said, you do not have the experience. You do not have the experience. Don't send me any more resumes. I said, okay, that's how it's going to be. So then I keep on, and wind up getting a job with the 10 o'clock news, the original 10 o'clock news, Channel 43, starting January 4th, 1988. Now, if I would have taken what that joker put in writing to embarrass me, to demoralize me, and took it as truth, I wouldn't be sitting here with you now.
Exactly.
So, people, young people, old people, anybody, You are the captain. You are the person that charts your own course. Don't let somebody sit back and give their opinion of what you should or you should not be.
I think that kind of goes back to the one monkey don't stop no show. Not even 1,000 monkeys, you know?
I'm telling you. And you just have to, you got to believe in yourself. You have to believe in that. And I tell this to my kids all the time. You know, you're the only person that you got to live with for the rest of your life. So you might as well make yourself happy.
Yeah.
And dismiss the stuff, the garbage.
What is your greatest skill?
Oh, I don't know if it's a skill. I think it's compassion.
It is a skill.
It's a skill.
How do you think it was built? Because
Mom and Dad.
Exactly.
Mom and Dad. I mean, if you would have had a chance to meet my father, just salt of the earth, just wonderful guy. He didn't suffer fools, as they say, but he was the wonderful guy. And then my mother was the same way. My people to this day come up to me and say, Miss Holbert helped me here. Miss Holbert did that. My mother passed away in 2012. My father, and the story that is so important is, as a reporter, I'm walking down Prospect, I don't know if I was going to a story, coming from a story or what, but as I'm walking down the street, this RTA bus pulls up and the bus stops, doors open, guy yells out, "Hey, is your name Ben Holbert?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "You know what? I've been hoping that I would see you." He said, "I used to work with your father. Your father was," and I can't, well, we're in a podcast, so you can insert the word. "Your father was a heck of a man." He said, "He was wonderful. When I first came on RTA, he mentored me, he tutored me, he worked with me." And he said, "I never thought I would see you, but I just want to tell you what heck of a man your father was." So here I am. I'm standing in the middle of Prospect like, gosh, you could bought me for a penny. And then I would hear stories about my mother. People would come up to me, tell me all the things that Miss Molly Holbert, who used to work for the Cleveland Metropolitan School District, did to help people who were trying to get a GED. She had a compassion and caring for people enough to say, "Look, you can do it. How can I help you get into this class?" And to this day, it's returning the investment, the benefit, because people are still coming up to me. My mom's been gone almost 20 years now, 15 years.
That's impressive. And that is the story of how you got your biggest skill, your greatest skill.
They poured it into you.
What would you say is a battle that you've had to deal with in your life? Whether it's envy, insecurity, alcoholism, drugs, anything.
No, good thing I can flat out say, never got involved with drugs. I take a glass of wine every now and then, but never did drug. Even at Kent, when it was all around you, never had a desire. Really didn't. Sometimes the biggest fear is trying to overcome that imposter syndrome. I mean, I ain't gonna lie to you. Some days I still have to do this and say, "Dang, I was a mayor? How did I become mayor?" Then I have to sit back and pinch myself and say, "You were on TV in Cleveland? You did news stories that went national? You covered Jeffrey Dahmer? You did this? You covered a space shuttle? You interviewed Oprah? You interviewed Don King, even though he didn't talk on the recorder. You interviewed all these people. A kid that grew up on the southeast side of Cleveland, little street called Kane Avenue, and he was able to do these things." Now, I'm going to tell you, I'm not rich. I ain't got a whole lot of money. But I have something that may be just as important as the riches, and that is great people that poured into me, that when I grew up, I don't believe I made too many people embarrassed. We all going to fall short every now and then. So there's a couple of things in my life that I wished I could go back and do a little bit better. But at the end of the day, I didn't take anybody's life. I didn't take anybody's money. I didn't take anybody's sanity or whatever else like that. I tried to live a good life and help people. Give back. Make a difference.
What's next for you?
Well, this guy that I sit across the table from. No, I'm really working on these memoirs because now, you know what? Honestly, after 67 years, going on 68 years of life, I've got a chance to sit back and review what I did. You know, and it's not one of those things saying, well, let's check this off. He did this, that, and the other, so forth and so on. It's not about that, but it's about maybe I can connect that dot to say, Ben went to a school and kids were not paying attention, but one person did. And now, who knows what they're doing. Ben went to Walmart one day, and a kid comes up to me. He's packing groceries, but he said, you came to my school at Patrick Henry, and I enjoyed everything you said. Your name is Ben Holbert. Man, I haven't been to Patrick Henry since, I can't even remember when I went over there. East Cleveland, Shaw, all these schools where nobody else wanted to talk to or pour into children, I went. Myself, Betty Halliburton, Harry Boomer, others would go and we would pour into kids. We were planting trees so other people could enjoy the shade. Mm-hmm. And so for me, that's what I'm, you know, I don't know how many more days the good Lord gonna give me. You know, bottom line, when you're born, 1959, then you get that little hash mark. And then, to everybody's surprise, you get them 4 digits. So we don't know where we are on that hash mark. But as long as I got breath in my lungs and the ability to be able to help and share and care and give back to people in the best way I possibly can, that's what's next for me. You know, I got people asking me, you want to be state rep? No! But just keep on, because if you say no, God might be saying, bruh, you can say whatever you want to say. I got something in store for you.
And how many Emmy Awards do you have?
I got 4.
Okay, 4 Emmy Awards.
I want 5. No.
Okay, so this is the last question. And it's the most thoughtful question.
Yeah.
What do you think will be your enduring legacy?
Great. Okay. And I'll put it to you in 2 ways. When I taught at Tri-C, and I also taught at Cleveland State as an adjunct, one day I asked the students, I said, we want to do some creative writing. And what I want you to do is I want you to write your obituary. And I didn't think a big deal of it. But this young lady got up and she couldn't even get through it. She started reading the first paragraph of what was going to be her obituary, and she just broke down. And I was like, wow, what did I do? But when you think about it, when you think about you as a person and what you've done when you've been on this planet and what you will leave behind, what will be the epitaph, what will be the obituary, I'm still trying to get to the point where my greater days are ahead of me. I don't know. I mean, you know, yeah, I've been a news reporter. I've been a mayor. Been elected official, been a father, been a this, been a that, been a husband, been a brother, been all of that. But at the end of the day, maybe in 20, well, I don't even want to know when I'm checking out of here. I don't want to say that. But when my time comes, I do. I want somebody to say that, like with Martin Luther King, I want somebody to say that he helped somebody. He helped somebody that might have been steering wrong. I want them to be able to say that Ben Holbert, just like his father, never met a stranger. Ben Holbert made a difference in the lives of the people he encountered. He tried to make it better in Woodmere. I had 8 years to try to do the best I could as mayor. And some days, as I say, I get frustrated because I wanted to do more. But you're only given so much time. But at the end of the day, I want my kids to be proud of me. I want my family to be proud of me. I want my wife to be proud of me. My sister, everybody. I want my phrase. I'll use this, close with this. People ask me some days about different things, and my response will be, I'm trying to make you proud. I don't care if it is the kid in school or if it is somebody that I've been knowing for 20 years older than me. I'm still trying to make people proud.
Wow. Now, if that's not a mic drop, I don't know what is. You have been the best of the Benjamins. You are literally the third Benjamin.
Okay, yeah, I'm Benjamin the third.
Nothing but the Benjamins.
Nothing but the Benjamins. Man, you wore me out. I'm tired now. I'm exhausted.
My enduring thoughts on Ben Holbert. He is a man who uses his life as a classroom. Oprah Winfrey is the one that said it. She said, use your life as a classroom. And Ben Holbert is doing that because what he has done is he has shown people that in order to get to the mountaintop, you have to thrive in the valley. And even if you don't like being in the valley, which none of us do, that is where you get built up from the floor up. And also someone told me that, you're never down. You're either up or you're getting up. And Ben has been getting up his entire life. And that's why he has left us a public inheritance of his lived experiences.